Nowadays, you can find kimchi in pretty much any grocery store, and most of them are actually pretty good. But if you're like me, I absolutely love freshly made kimchi. So I'm going to show you guys how to make my version, which is actually a recipe that I adapted from Kimchi. As always, full instruction and list of ingredients in the description below. I will warn you though that you might have to go to the Asian grocer to get some of the ingredients, so you might as well go and get all of it because normally their Napa Cabbage is much better than what you can find in the American grocery stores. You want to look for cabbage that's pretty fresh and leafy green. Oftentimes the cabbage you find in an American grocery store is picked too early, so it's kind of pale green, and a lot of times it's limp because it's been sitting there forever. But anyway, we're going to start by quartering our cabbage and then cutting it down into bite-sized pieces, about 2" by 2". Next, we're going to wash our cabbage. Cabbage will oftentimes have sand or dirt stuck in between the leaves, so you want to make sure you wash it really well. And I'm going to let this play out because I want you to use this as a cook-along. But if you're just watching this to get information, feel free to jump ahead. But we're going to wash the cabbage using the rule of 3. In other words, wash it 3 times. So the quantities down below are actually meant for like 10 pounds of cabbage. And for whatever reason, when Koreans make cabbage, they make a ton of it. Probably because you can keep it for a really long time. But I'm only using 2 heads of cabbage here, so I actually have a lot of leftover paste in the end. And that's even a lot. This 2 heads of cabbage was enough to make, I don't know how much kimchi I gave away, but I had a ton. But the great thing about kimchi paste is that you can store it and use it later to make cucumber kimchi, daikon radish kimchi, or whatever kind of kimchi you want. Like in this video, I used the leftover paste to make baby bok choy kimchi, which is actually really good, one of my favorites. After you're done washing your cabbage, we're going to salt the cabbage. We're using about ½ a cup of Korean sea salt. This salt is kind of coarse and flaky, and any kind of non-iodized salt should work here, like kosher salt. But if you're using a really fine salt, you might have to dial back on the amount just a tiny bit. I don't think it really matters in the long run because you wash all the cabbage at the end of the salting process anyway. After we're done salting, we're going to let this sit for about ½ an hour before we mix it up. So we're going to go ahead and make the base of our kimchi paste, which starts with sweetened or glutinous rice flour. Here's a little side tip: when you're making your glutinous rice flour, you want to put it into a bowl first and then take your hot water and spoon it into that bowl and mix it in there. And then we're going to take that mixture and then put it into our pot of hot water. And we do that because it helps to avoid clumps. If you pour your glutinous flour directly into the pot, it's going to clump up and you're going to just have a hard time getting everything dissolved. Once we've got our glutinous flour mixture dissolved and nice and smooth, we're going to add our sugar. You want to use white sugar because it dissolves easier. I'm using cane sugar because that's what I had on hand. And once your sugar is dissolved, we're going to take this pot off the heat and let the mixture chill out. Okay, it's been about 30 minutes since we first salted our cabbage. We're now going to flip this around a bunch of times, and we're going to do this total 3 times. Next up comes the most difficult and time-consuming part of making kimchi, which is prepping the daikon, the carrots, and our scallions. And what we're doing here is basically julienning the daikon and the carrots into little matchsticks, and you want to make sure you get them as thin as possible because you don't really want big hunks of carrots or daikon in your kimchi. Unless you do want big hunks of daikon or carrot, I personally don't like it. I actually don't like to put too much daikon in my cabbage kimchi because I feel like it kind of makes a funky smell. You know, that funky daikon smell when it's fermenting? Yeah, I don't really like that in my kimchi. I do like daikon kimchi by itself. Another 30 minutes is up. We're going to flip our cabbage again. Moving on, we're going to put some ginger and garlic into a food processor. And if you don't have a food processor, I guess you can do it manually, but this makes it so much simpler. And here's another pro tip: while you're at the Asian grocery store, grab yourself a container of the pre-peeled garlic. Gonna save yourself a lot of time. I use garlic on everything, and having that peeled garlic on hand is so convenient, but I would not suggest looking up how your garlic's peeled. It really is kind of disturbing. Anyway, into your processor goes your ginger, garlic, and half an onion, and we're gonna blend this until smooth. And then to this mix, we're going to add some fish sauce. And of course, I'm using the Three Crabs brand. And then some of these fermented little tiny shrimps. This is optional, but I feel like it adds a little extra depth, a little of that umami that you get from seafood. Or you can use squid, like a salted squid. That's what Kimchi does. And then we're going to add our Korean pepper flakes. And then finally, our glutinous flour mixture that is sitting on the stove. And once your mixture is nice and smooth, our kimchi paste is basically done. You can actually store this stuff and use it later if you want. If you're making only 1 or 2 heads of cabbage, only use like half of it, but we're going to mix that into our daikon and carrot mixture. I'm going to use my hands because really that's the best way to do it, but if you don't have gloves for whatever reason, a spoon is fine. It's just much easier using your hands, and plus it kind of feels cool. Alright, let's get back to the cabbage. It should have been salting for about an hour and a half. We're now going to rinse and drain this 3 times. You want to get all of the excess sauce. You want to get all the excess salt out of your cabbage as much as possible. And if you're not sure you went far enough with the salting, take a bite of one of the pieces of cabbage and you should have kind of a slightly salty and soft cabbage. If it feels too crispy yet, you can let it go a little longer. It's not gonna go bad or anything, and it's not like an exact science. You know, just kind of feel it. You know, use your senses, your taste, your smell. That's the secret to cooking. All right, now we're gonna take our cabbage, put it into a big container. You're gonna need a really big container or several containers for this, but the easiest way is to get a big container, and then we're gonna mix in our kimchi paste, which is incorporated into the daikon, carrots, and green onions now. And we're going to mix it up really well. And as you can see, I like to use a lot of paste. So my kimchi is usually kind of bright red. Use as little or as much as you want. But even using that much paste, I still have a bunch left over. But before we cover this up and put it away, I do like to take a little bit out to eat right away because I love freshly made kimchi. I actually like it better than fermented kimchi, which kind of negates the positive side effects of eating kimchi, which is the probiotics. But dang, this stuff is so good with a little bit of sesame seeds sprinkled on top and some nice fresh rice. But here I'm just gonna eat it as is, like a salad. So this kimchi actually is kind of like a stunt kimchi. I had to make another batch because I forgot to film the money shot at the end of making the original video. But in this kimchi, I actually put some leeks into it. And I like to do that because the leeks add kind of like this onion flavor and a little bit of texture. It's really good. Give it a try. But like I said at the beginning of this video, you can get kimchi pretty much anywhere and it's actually pretty decent, but there's nothing like making your own kimchi and then handing it out to your friends and family. Alright, bonus footage. So I have a bunch of leftover kimchi paste and I just happen to have some bok choy in my fridge, so we're gonna basically do the same thing. We're gonna cut up our bok choy and rinse it really well. Now you might have to rinse it a couple extra times because bok choy is notoriously sandy because I believe they grow it in sand. But you want to make sure you get this stuff nice and clean. So rinse it out a bunch of times until you don't see any more sand in the bottom of your basin. We're going to salt it just like we did with the cabbage. Exact same process. It's really just, it's a no-brainer. If you have anything left to make into kimchi, do it. You got all this leftover kimchi paste. Why not, right? And I find that for bok choy and daikon kimchi, you want it to ferment a little bit. You can eat it fresh, which I'm going to do here, but it is going to be a little bit more bitter. But we're going to add in a little bit of red onion here just to add some crunch. And that is it, guys. Some bok choy kimchi, which you can enjoy immediately or let sit for a little bit. And that is pretty much it for the video. If you aren't a subscriber, take a second and subscribe now for more cooking videos. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.